This week's episode of Discovery was directed by my space dad, Jonathan Frakes, which means I have to like it, right? Wrong. I mean, I did like it, but not because I had to. This is a review of Stormy Weather, the 6th episode of Star Trek Discovery's 4th season. If you're watching this before you've seen the episode, don't worry, this review is spoiler-free. 2 in a row! If you've been watching these reviews as I post them, you'll no doubt remember that I was kind of on the 3rd and 4th episodes of this season, but then last week the show bounced back with The Examples, a strong, focused episode that included a moral dilemma worthy of classic Star Trek. And this week, Discovery drops another excellent episode in the form of Stormy Weather. The plot here is very closely tied in with the overarching story of the season involving the mysterious dark matter anomaly, or DMA, that has been wreaking havoc across the galaxy. But once the situation for this episode is established, it becomes more or less a standalone episode. And historically, Discovery has been very good at those. Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, the Harry Mudd time loop episode from season 1, remains a series highlight. Likewise, for season 2's New Eden, the mostly standalone episode Anomaly remains the best episode of this season so far, with this episode, Stormy Weather, not too far behind. Discovery is nearly always at its best when it's able to either take a break from the big story or find a way to further that big story that allows the episode to remain mostly self-contained, which is the case here. As with Anomaly and one of the plots from last week's The Examples, this episode is all about attacking the mystery of the DMA. Last week, we saw Stamets and Tarka, the dickhead science genius, create a miniature version of the DMA to try and figure out what makes it tick. This week, Starfleet orders Captain Burnham to take the Discovery into a subspace rift left behind by the DMA in the hopes of learning more about what it is and where it comes from. What happens next calls to mind what some would consider the not-so-classic episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where silence has lease, the Nagilum episode. And I don't know, I always kind of like that one. But whereas in that episode, the Enterprise found itself trapped by a conscious entity intent on using its crew as lab rats, in Stormy Weather, the crew of Discovery finds itself at the mercy of nothing. The plot of the episode proceeds along broadly familiar lines. First, the crew investigates the nature of their surroundings, searches for a something within the nothing. Then, when a threat is identified, they shift gears and start looking for a way out. And like Where Silence Has Lease, where the Enterprise escapes after Picard basically wins a game of chicken with the godlike being that has trapped the ship, Discovery's escape from this pocket of nothing inside a subspace rift comes down to a serious put up or shut up performance from the captain. One of the things I really like about this episode is how it's able to split the difference between the intense focus of Anomaly and the less focused character stuff we got in the 2 episodes that followed it. Here we get that focus with one main plot, but we also get some very nice character stuff from Book, Gray, and even Zora, the ship's sphere data enhanced computer, all of which follows directly from that central plot. It's very nicely done, everything fitting together so the episode never feels like it's cutting away from the main action to check in on something else. It all feels central and important. Book's story this season continues to evolve in a logical and interesting way. He's passed through grief to anger to a yearning for revenge, but he's also shown a willingness to try and see past his own feelings and trust other people. That theme is something else, along with the central plot, that ties this episode together. We see multiple characters dealing with unpleasant feelings, anger, fear, loneliness, and working through them by holding on to their connections to others. Establishing those connections between characters in a believable way is really, really important. I've said before that the main reason Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek show is that out of the entire franchise, that's the show where the relationships between the characters feel the most real. I care about the show and I care about those characters because when I watch it, I really believe that they care about each other. Discovery has been good at that. With the characters, it's been able to meaningfully develop, that is. The one big flaw in this episode and the drawback to having that notion of trust and connection bear so much thematic weight is that it reminds us how little we still know about most of the people we see on the bridge of the ship. There's a big moment late in the episode where they're going to try this risky maneuver to escape from the void, and everyone needs to go hide somewhere, basically. I won't get more specific than that. And they end up mostly going in groups of 3. And we see these characters holding hands and preparing to go. And it's shot and acted so as to suggest really deep bonds between these characters, which is good and something the show has done before, and which makes sense given all the things these people have been through together on this ship. But I wish I felt like I knew more of them a little better. It registers that they care about each other, but I don't know them. So it doesn't feel as real. It doesn't land as solidly as it should. And that's a long-term issue with the show. It can't be solved with one episode. And it's not really fair to blame any one episode for it, but it is an issue I'd like to see addressed. It seems the writers agree that this is a problem because the last few episodes have had brief scenes where those underdeveloped supporting characters get to become involved in the story and blurt out a bit of their backstory in the process. Last week, we learned that Reese lived through a hurricane when he was a child. This week, we get Awoshikun sharing a similar bit of character history, and Bryce randomly being the only person on the bridge who knows what sonar is. It's not the most elegant way to develop characters, but it's something, and I appreciate that an effort is being made, however clumsy and belated that effort might be. But, like I said, that's really my only problem with this episode. Overall, I thought it was terrific. Once again, we get to see these characters torn between taking risks to learn more about the DMA and possibly serve the greater good, and pulling back in order to save themselves to fight another day. We learn a little bit more about the DMA that hopefully points us toward more compelling developments as we head into the second half of this season. And we get a situation that is tense, that develops in interesting ways with a few twists thrown in near the end, so that just when our heroes think they've figured out a solution, they get dealt another setback that throws everything into question again. Solid, classic suspense storytelling. And ultimately, we get a unified episode with a definitive beginning, middle, and end that still ties into the larger story arc of the season in a meaningful way. I still think the second episode of this season, Anomaly, is the best show of season 4 so far, but this one is a very, very strong runner-up. Terrific work from everyone involved. I'm invested, and I want more, which is pretty important for series television, I think. Those are my thoughts about this episode. Let me know what you thought, but remember, my review was spoiler-free, so if you're going to include spoilers in your comments, please include a spoiler warning so that folks who haven't seen the episode yet can avoid spoilers if they want. If you want to support my channel, go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron, or click the join button to become a member. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for a review of episode 7.